Tom Fitzpatrick ranks among the most remarkable men to ever seek his fortune on the frontier. He's traveled farther, fought harder, and faced more danger than almost any mountain man of his time. But despite his unquenchable spirit and proven courage, his luck may have run out at last. After starting a solo journey to reach the annual Trappers' Rendezvous, Fitzpatrick's run into a war party of Gros Ventre braves. The Gros Ventre are fearsome warriors, renowned for both their fighting skills and their relentless pursuit of enemies. And once they find the track of their prey, almost nothing could shake them off. Fitzpatrick is only moments away from being discovered. And all he can do is pray that the prowling warriors will somehow fail to find him. With an iron will and fierce intellect, Tom Fitzpatrick becomes one of the key figures of the mountain man era.
Fitzpatrick has a lust for exploration coupled with an entrepreneurial spirit. He also has a tenacity that many men, even among his peers, lacked.
This guy is the most intrepid, stalwart, forward-moving person as a role model.
He crosses paths with the most famous frontiersmen of his era, including Jim Bridger, Jedediah Smith, and James Beckwourth.
He's able to be the key figure in Western history from 1823 until his death in 1853. And in that 30-year period, he plays a major role in almost all of the events that are occurring in the Central and Northern Rockies.
In 1823, a young and ambitious Fitzpatrick ventures to St. Louis, the gateway to the West and the last outpost of civilization.
Everything that went west went through St. Louis. All you had to do was leave town and go up the Mississippi a few miles and take a left on the Missouri, and you're on your way to a whole world of riches and excitement.
Like hundreds of young men like him, Fitzpatrick seeks his fortune on America's vast frontier. And an ambitious fur trader, William Ashley, is recruiting for a dangerous expedition into the distant West.
Ashley put some ads in the paper looking to recruit enterprising young men to go up the river and there to hunt for 1-2 years or more.
The thriving fur trade is fueled by an international fashion craze for beaver felt hats.
They needed beaver hair to turn into felt, which was then turned into hats. And basically, every man, woman, and child in Europe had a felt hat if they could afford it.
Enterprising men could grow rich from trapping beaver, if they could survive in the wilderness.
I think Thomas Fitzpatrick saw an opportunity to try our luck. We'll roll the dice, and maybe we'll make some money.
What's your name, lad?
Tom Fitzpatrick, sir. Oh, County Carvin, Ireland.
Oh, Mr. Fitzpatrick, I am enrolling men of good health who will not shy from danger to explore the headwaters of the Missouri. While there, we will hunt and trap beaver and seek trade with the Indians of those parts. We could be away for a year, maybe 2, perhaps even 3. And I cannot promise your safety, nor that you'll return with a fortune.
I need no such promise, sir. And I'm fit nor prone to sickness, and I'll set my hand to any task that you require.
Well, if you will come, sign or leave your mark.
I've had my schooling, sir. I can read and write.
We don't know much about his family life or growing up, but we imagine that he went to some kind of a school, perhaps a parish school for the Catholic Church, and was taught reading, writing, and arithmetic. These skills would aid him well throughout the course of his life.
Now, if you're educated, why not seek a trade?
Because, sir, the world is wide, and I mean to see my share of it. And if there's money to be made trapping, I'll do so.
Well, I'm glad to have you, lad.
Thank you, sir.
After traveling hundreds of miles up the Missouri River, Ashley is ready to try a new approach to collecting beaver pelts.
Instead of trading primarily with Indians for furs and hides, he would rely on mountain men to supply those furs.
And despite being an inexperienced greenhorn, Fitzpatrick quickly proves his worth.
Well done, lad. You're among the best this week.
It's mainly luck, sir.
No, Tom, no. You put in more work than most.
If you could read and write in the fur trade, that was worth a lot. You could at least do a clerk's job.
There's a few crow across the river, sir, signaling the trade. You want to go parlay?
Fitz!
The clerk, he was usually the second in command if the captain wasn't there.
Yes, sir.
I'm counting the Indian trade goods that we have left. Would you mind finishing for me?
Surely.
Fitzpatrick survives his first season with Ashley's brigade and signs on for another year. But with the upper Missouri nearly trapped out, he wants to locate new beaver-rich regions not yet discovered by trappers. There's just one problem: the massive Rocky Mountains, which lie directly in the path of westward exploration.
As you move west, you come across an imposing, almost unparalleled physical boundary, and that is the Rocky Mountains.
2 decades earlier, Lewis and Clark proved there's no water route across the Rockies. But rumors about a pass through the mountains have circulated since 1812. Fitzpatrick believes he can find it. And if he does, he'll open a vast new region to trapping and trade. Joining him in the daring attempt is an equally ambitious frontiersman named Jedediah Smith.
South?
And the Crows say, right down south of here, there's a place where you can just walk over the mountains and the beaver on the other side. You don't even need a trap.
Hey, can you ask him how far it is?
How far south?
Yeah? All right. Thank you.
Well, what's he saying, Fitz?
He said it's far. He said it's very far.
As far as Fitzpatrick knows, no American has crossed the Rocky Mountains since the time of Lewis and Clark. But for a man determined to make his fortune on the frontier, the rewards of attempting the passage are well worth the risk. Fitzpatrick leads his companions hundreds of miles away from the nearest frontier settlements, seeking a mountain pass that may not even exist.
Yeah,
Maybe there ain't no such a place as South Pass. If there is, we ain't nowheres near it.
Crow, Blackfeet, Nez Perce all say there's a low point at which one can cross over the mountains. They've no reason to lie to us.
Maybe Pete is right, Fitz. I mean, even if there is such a pass, there's no way of knowing where it is. Plus, we're down to a few days' food.
You turn back if you must. I'm going on ahead. Come on, let's go.
I mean, we come this far. Let's see it through. Yeah.
But there's more than just pride on the line. Because if Fitzpatrick doesn't find a pass through the mountains, he and his partners may not make it back alive. Tom Fitzpatrick and two companions have trekked deep into the Rocky Mountains, seeking a long-lost pass over the Continental Divide.
Emerging between these majestic mountain peaks is a valley, 20 miles long and seemingly inviting you, beckoning you to come forward, not only for the rich natural resources that are there, but maybe the lives that lay beyond.
And just as their food and endurance is running out, Fitzpatrick believes they've found the fabled pass at last.
Most people think of a mountain that goes up and then there's a pass and you go down the mountain. But in this case, South Pass, the geography there is a very gentle, rolling, elevated plain that hardly any vegetation is growing there.
We're standing in South Pass right now. I know it.
Fitz, what makes you think that? We came through a pass through the mountains, but how you know this is South Pass?
I'll show you. You see this, all right? Where's that going?
If you get to a certain point, you can see water running to the west, and 2 feet away, you can see water running to the east. It's amazing.
It's going downstream.
Which way?
I don't know. West.
West. The water's flowing west. We're on the west side of the mountains, west side of the divide. This is South Pass.
Fitz.
You done it!
Even a blind hog finds an acorn.
South Pass!
To discover a seemingly passable part of terrain between two mountains that was actually navigable, that you could envision people going through, it had to be an emotional moment for everyone involved.
You mark my words, boys. One of these days, there's gonna be ox wagons rolling through this valley by the hundreds.
I ain't never seen a wagon make it past Independence Rock, to my way of thinking.
Yeah, we may be the first, but we ain't gonna be the last.
Yeah, I take that back. There's gonna be wagons by the thousands.
Ah. And we were the first.
That we were. That we were.
Rediscovering an overland route to Oregon and California triggers a seismic shift in Western migration.
The immigrant trails all cross South Pass, and even the railroad eventually crosses nearby. The ability to get over the Continental Divide with a wheeled vehicle is all because of South Pass.
Other explorers are sometimes credited with finding the South Pass. But Tom Fitzpatrick understands how important it will become.
It's an incredible vision and an incredible prediction of what actually came to pass over the next 20 to 40 years.
The new overland route through South Pass also spurs a revolution in the American fur trade.
They realized that if we were going to keep these guys going, without them having to travel back and forth to get equipment, we're going to have to meet them out there. And so they instigated the Rocky Mountain Rendezvous.
A rendezvous was an annual meetup of mountain men. It would meet in the summer to exchange furs and also resupply for the coming season.
So they would bring these pack caravans to a predetermined location, and all you trappers, you meet us there, and we'll buy your beaver and we'll sell your supplies.
Sugar, coffee, flour, every kind of foo-fa-ra that some Indian may want to trade something for, ribbon, beads, thimbles, needles, whiskey, clothing, shovels, pickaxes, you name it.
But it's also an important social event for these men, many of whom lived in complete isolation for large portions of the year.
For William Ashley, the annual Trappers Rendezvous is big business. He makes a fortune by hauling goods from St. Louis to trade at the Rendezvous, at an enormous markup, of course.
And he also knew that he would have these guys in the palm of his hand to a certain degree. And markups on goods of 2,000% over St. Louis prices were not uncommon.
Because you're in the mountains. Where are you going to get it? You got to pay that price or you don't get it.
And it takes little time for Tom Fitzpatrick to realize he's on the wrong side of the fur trade.
What'd you pay for that knife, Jim?
I talked that rascal down to $2.
That's not a bad mountain price. You know how much that blade would be in St. Louis? 50 cents. So after all your haggling, that's still a 400% markup.
Sure, it's steep, but you know none of us is trekking all the way back to St. Louis every time we need a knife.
Well, that's true for flint, coffee, sugar, copper wire, wool, clothes. I mean, that's what I'm saying. You make the money here trading the beaver, not trapping it. You see what I mean?
Oh, Fitz, you got it all figured out. Why don't you start a trading outfit of your own, huh?
You know, Jim, in your own special way, you're a proper genius.
Fitzpatrick did the math and said, I should be a supplier to the Rendezvous. That's how you're going to make money. It's not trapping in the streams all of the time.
But the Rendezvous is more than just a place of business. It also allows contact with the civilized world in the distant east.
Morning. Just a bit of flint, nothing fancy.
Indeed, and bar lead too.
Is that a bit of Shakespeare? Volume right there. Do you mind?
No.
Astonishing. How much of this set me back?
1 and 5 more.
5 more. All right, let's do it. Thank you.
And after several successful years on the frontier, Fitzpatrick's become a respected member of the tight-knit mountain man community.
This story shall a good man teach his son, from this day till the ending of the world. But we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. And gentlemen of bed will think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhood cheap, while any man speaks who fought with us on St. Crispin's Day.
Yeah. Well, that sounds a fair bit like us, don't it?
Yes, I think it does.
Except one thing. Who in the heck is St. Crispin?
I don't know.
St. Crispin.
By 1830, Fitzpatrick has learned enough about the business to become a founding partner of the Rocky Mountain Fur Company.
In 7 years, he's gone from someone hardly anybody knew to one of the principals of one of the major fur companies in the region at that time. So that's the man that's looking for opportunity.
And as Fitzpatrick's career in the fur trade prospers, he takes on the responsibilities of leadership that go with it.
We have to beat those clouds, so heat up and we're gonna turn out, all right?
Now working as a trader instead of a trapper, Fitzpatrick is responsible for leading a pack train and a dozen teamsters.
Horses are like gold on the American prairies. A horse next to a gun is your most valuable possession on the American plains. Trappers have to cover huge expanses, so to be on foot might as well be a death sentence.
And pack trains like Fitzpatrick's are a tempting prize for one of the most ferocious tribes of the frontier.
Horses were everything to the Blackfeet. It was part of your social mobility. It was how you courted a wife. It was how you became part of a warrior society.
Fitzpatrick is about to learn how fiercely the Blackfeet will fight to make off with his invaluable horses. Masters of stealth and ambush, the Blackfeet are able to strike without warning.
The horses!
They're yelling and screaming and chasing these horses, wanting to run these horses off.
Horses running everywhere, right? Men don't know what to do. Right? It's a moment of chaos.
Thinking fast, Fitzpatrick hits on a clever but dangerous plan of action.
You keep those Blackfeet off my back!
What's the most important thing here? Well, it's the horses. How are you going to save them?
Keep them off my back! No, wait!
Fitzpatrick jumps on one of the horses and he rides circles around all those horses in the camp and keeps them contained.
After recovering his horses, Fitzpatrick instantly turns his attention to the Blackfeet Raiders who took them.
Fitzpatrick understands that what's required in this moment is a show of strength. He needs to take revenge to send a message to the Blackfeet to leave him alone.
Boys! Hey, how many are there? 20, I don't know. All right. Keep the fire up, boys. Keep the fire up, boys. Boys! There we go, here we go. Hey, how many are there? 20, I don't know.
With an amazing feat of horsemanship, Tom Fitzpatrick just saved his brigade's horses from a Blackfeet raid.
I got him. I got him. Some over there!
Now, he's about to teach the Blackfeet a lesson they won't soon forget.
Stay low.
Keep in mind, these guns only shoot one time, and then you have to reload.
The amount of time it takes to fire, reload, fire again, it's not seconds, it's minutes. So these types of protracted battles were commonplace in the American frontier.
Keep the fire up, boys. Keep the fire up, boys. Keep it up. Keep up the fire now. Go there.
But the long-range gunfight won't drive off the Blackfeet.
Get up. All right, boys.
So Fitzpatrick decides to bring the fight directly to the enemy.
1-3. We're gonna give him a volley, and then turn the hooks, all right? Yeah. Finish it. 1, 2, 3.
After 6 hours of fighting, the Blackfeet are driven off without taking a single horse or scalp. The battle cements Fitzpatrick's reputation as a cool hand under fire and as a man not afraid to take risks.
His courage and his resolve and his perseverance and his desire to outlast his assailants is something that would enable him to survive situations where many other people would have perished.
In the summer of 1832, mountain men and trappers gather in a beautiful valley in present-day Idaho called Pierre's Hole.
1832 rendezvous in Pierre's Hole was one of the largest rendezvous throughout that period. A lot of people, probably close to 300 trappers, a very, very large contingent.
But several weeks into the rendezvous, one notable frontiersman has yet to arrive. For the past 2 years, Fitzpatrick has been trading supplies at the rendezvous for the Rocky Mountain Fur Company.
Tom Fitzpatrick is the main guy. He's going back and forth to St. Louis, bringing supplies out, and then directing everybody kind of where to go.
But this year, bad weather has delayed him on the longer than usual trek from St. Louis.
Today, to drive from St. Louis to Pierre's Hole would take you 20 hours. It's about a 1,500-mile journey. In 1832, on horseback with wagons, that took you over 2 months.
Now he worries the trappers will take their business to his rival, the American Fur Company, if they don't know he's arriving soon with trade goods.
We're a month late to the rendezvous. We're gonna ride ahead express. Let them know we'll be there in a few days.
There's word of Grove on war parties about, Fitz.
That's why I'm taking your fastest horse. Hold that, would you?
We understand the pressure that Fitzpatrick is under. Right? He's got people, friends, colleagues out there in the wilderness who haven't heard from him for months.
Don't tap that Taos lightning without me, Bill. Come on.
Watch yourself, Fitz.
He makes the faithful decision to go ahead of the supply train, to get to the camp, to tell them that supplies are on the way.
So Fitzpatrick's going to ride ahead. As he's traveling across the mountains, it turns into a harrowing ride.
Very quickly, things begin to go awry. And something happens that doesn't happen to him very often. He gets lost.
And it's while traveling alone that Fitzpatrick encounters his worst nightmare. A mounted war party of the fearsome Gros Ventre tribe.
The Gros Ventre were a tribe of Plains Indians who were allies of the Blackfeet, who were enemies of most of the white trappers out there. Fitzpatrick sees them, they see him, and they begin to take chase.
Fitzpatrick is running as hard as he can. He's crossing the Green River Valley, headed over toward the Wyoming mountains. And he pretty soon realizes that this isn't going to work. These horses are going to give out on me.
So he abandons his horse and continues up the hill on foot.
Fitzpatrick's now in the most desperate race he's ever run, knowing full well that if he's caught, he'll lose both his scalp and his life. Frontiersman Tom Fitzpatrick just stumbled into a Native American war party. And now he's running for his life. With his horse exhausted by the chase, he's forced to flee on foot and find a place to hide if he can.
He knows there's nowhere to run. In that moment, he has to make a decision. So he decides to hide.
Fitzpatrick conceals himself in a patch of thick underbrush. now, all he can do is wait and pray the Gros Ventre don't find him.
Those Gros Ventres are hunting all around him. And sometimes they're passing within 10 or 12 feet of him. The thought had to have been in the back of his mind, holy cow, I ain't gonna make it.
You can imagine the anxiety that he's feeling. He knows what it means if he's caught. It means his death.
Fitzpatrick spends almost 3 full days in hiding. But when he emerges, the Gros Ventres are gone.
So he can leave, but where to is the next question.
He has neither horse nor food, and he's utterly alone in a trackless wilderness.
Where do you go? He's still lost. So he looks around. Looking at the peaks, he tries to orient himself towards what he believes is the direction of Pierre's hole, and he sets out.
After a grueling 2-day trek, Fitzpatrick reaches what he hopes is the Pierre River in present-day Idaho. His next challenge is getting across before the Gros Ventre Raiders discover him again.
He is still keenly aware of the threat that faces him at any moment. So he thinks that if he's able to get across this river, the Gros Ventre will not follow him.
So he builds a raft. He puts his gun and his blanket and his shooting pouch on that raft, and he's swimming that raft across.
But just as Fitzpatrick reaches what he hopes is safety on the other side of the river,
No!
a new disaster strikes.
No!
For a man alone on the frontier, losing one's rifle isn't an inconvenience. It's a death sentence. But Tom Fitzpatrick isn't about to give up the fight to survive. After escaping a war party eager to take his scalp, trapper Tom Fitzpatrick is lucky to be alive.
No!
But now that he's lost his rifle in the Pierre River, that luck may have just run out.
He emerges on the other side, wet, tired, and now with nothing but the clothes on his back and a butcher knife.
He's feeling pretty devastated. He doesn't have a gun. He doesn't have a blanket. He's thinking, now what do I do? His main goal is still to get to Rendezvous. So he may not be moving fast, just a day at a time or an hour at a time.
Completely unaware that Fitzpatrick is missing, William Sublette and the supply train arrive at the rendezvous in Pierre's hole.
Nobody really knows that Fitzpatrick has separated from the caravan, so all the guys at the rendezvous expect to see Fitzpatrick arrive when Sublette and the trade goods get there.
Bill! Hey, Bill!
Hey, Jim. Where's Fitz? I'm ready for that drink.
Well, Fitz ain't here. He's not with you?
No, he went ahead. He should have been here days ago. Anyone seen Fitz?
Oh.
And Sublette and those guys are going, well, he left weeks ago. We thought he'd be here. So nobody knew what happened to Fitzpatrick. Everybody's kind of wondering, is Fitz dead?
Because Sublette just traveled the route Fitzpatrick was supposed to follow, the trappers can't even guess where to search for him. So for now, all they can do is wait and hope. Meanwhile, Fitzpatrick's situation has gone from serious to dire.
He doesn't have the equipment to be able to build a fire. Certainly with only a knife, he can't take down a buffalo or an elk. He's going to be subsistence living food-wise.
But as Fitzpatrick heads into higher altitudes, the terrain becomes harsher and harsher. And even worse, it offers no source of water.
The human body needs water. The average person can go for about 3 days without it. One of the perverse symptoms of dehydration can be forgetfulness, disorientation, or confusion, leading him to a very bad place.
More than a week into his ordeal, Fitzpatrick's extraordinary endurance has reached its limit.
Fitzpatrick, who has stared death in the face multiple times on this harrowing journey, finally reconciles himself with the fact that this truly is the end.
And with no sign that any help will reach him, Fitzpatrick can't push himself to go on.
He's kind of losing his wits, and he says, this is probably it, and commends his soul to God.
Lord, please have mercy on me.
Frontiersman Tom Fitzpatrick has been wandering the wilderness for days without food or shelter. And has reached the limits of his endurance.
Please have mercy on me.
But even as his strength fails, the Irishman's luck turns yet again. Two trappers from the Rendezvous are out hunting when, by pure chance, they discover Fitzpatrick.
God, he's alive.
A man who had been prepared to die, fully expected to open his eyes and see, well, something supernatural, instead finds that he is still among the world of the living.
Come on, up, come on. Okay. Water. Have some water.
By the time he does get found, he's in such a poor condition that the guys that find him don't even recognize who he is.
It's Fitz. Let's get it up. Let's get him up. Wait. I need my hat. Let's get out of here.
By the time Fitzpatrick arrives at the Rendezvous, his friends and partners have given him up for dead.
Is that Fitz? Oh, God, it's Fitz! It's Fitz. That is.
Well, of course, everybody's relieved. You know, gosh, I thought we'd lost Fitz, you know. And so there was probably some frolic and some celebration.
Get him down up there. Get him down up there.
Fitz.
Please, tell me you didn't crack that Taos lightning without me. I've had a trip, boys.
The camaraderie amongst these guys was tremendous. While they were incredibly independent, they learned that they had to be interdependent. They had to rely on one another.
So how do I look?
The whole experience is clearly a testament to Fitzpatrick's skill as an outdoorsman. We know that Fitzpatrick was a clever man. He was an intelligent man. And that might have been what enabled him to survive.
What's for dinner? If it had been 2 Indians, I would have shot the one, run the other 3 with my knife. 4 Indians? I kind of fancied that hole I found myself.
But even though Fitzpatrick has lived to tell his tale, the experience has left an indelible mark.
There's one thing you haven't told us yet, Fitz.
What's that?
How'd your hair go white?
My hair go white? What do you mean?
It is reported that that harrowing experience, that chase with the Brovons, the dangers, actually turned his hair white. And he became known as White Hair from that point on. Crazy story.
Tom Fitzpatrick will go on to years of adventure and achievement on the frontier and become a true American hero.
Some guys were just plumb happy to trap, take the furs to Rendezvous, have a big hoorah, and go back to the mountains and do it again. Thomas Fitzpatrick had a certain amount of ambition and was always looking for opportunities to either advance or improve a situation.
Fitzpatrick was able to leave an impression on everyone he met. They all commented on how intense his eyes were and how they revealed the passion that he had within to see things through.
This guy had the guts and the stamina to make it through just about anything. He had the wilderness skills to not give up, to keep trying, to put one foot in front of the other. Fitzpatrick just keeps moving and moving.